this had happened in the United States, we would all probably be standing in front of the White House. And so the same kind of reaction must be heard. And so we hope that in these gatherings in our own communities, it echoes so that our government hears our voices and lends its resources to the people of Nigeria. I think that it begs for us as those who care for our own children, who hopefully care for the children in our communities, to care for these children as well, as we observe Mother's Day and give Mother her due, if you will, and fathers too, who act as mothers. We must think about and lift up and keep in our thoughts and meditations the mothers in Nigeria, the mothers in this tiny village that have lost these beautiful, scholarly daughters in which they've invested everything. We must care about those mothers on this Mother's Day weekend. I think that we as Americans have a legacy and even an obligation to care not just about our own, but about all of us. It was King who said that we are bound by this inexplicable thread of humanity. And so we must remember that. We must hold that in our hearts. And those who would say that we should take care of our own first, or that we have those who we need to take care of, I would say that they're right. But I don't think it has to be an either or. I think it should be a both and. I think social media has exploded, and we saw that in the 2008 campaign, and we continue to see that. In the NAACP, we use social media as a way to educate people where they are. Just looking at the First Lady of these United States holding that sign with the hashtag Bring Back Our Girls says it all. That if she would just put that image out there, that people would begin to retweet that hashtag, to attach their own pictures and messages, and then create this kind of flash, if you will, that we hope will be heard indeed around the world. One of the things I think about is that all civilization began in Africa. And so if we believe that, and science and everything we know tells us that that's true, if we believe that, then we're all Africans. Maybe we might think in different ways about subjects like mass incarceration and health disparities and the achievement gap. And yes, these international human rights violations that call our attention.
And I didn't speak out because I wasn't a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. When I think of those words, I think of King, who said, while criticizing black separatism, that we are bound together in a single garment of destiny. Essentially, that we rise and we fall together, and that there is no us versus them, is because what happens in Nigeria has deep repercussions for the rest of the world. Nigeria having the largest economy in Africa, being a spot that the world should pay attention to, and should be a global leader, and must not have these feeble responses We can't let any government have these feeble responses. The world must call them, demand that they act, and we must act. And we must do more than share information. We've really got to share our resources with the world. We took resources out of Africa. Those resources must be returned, and it must happen now. You know, I know that Black women are often invisible in the world. It's been studied on the national stage and on the world stage that Black women's lives just don't matter, and that when people are talking about gender equality, they're talking about white women, and when they're talking about racial equality, they're talking about Black men. So where does that leave the Black woman and these beautiful girls that we have all adopted as our own Facebook profiles and in our own tweets? It has to be more than a hashtag. But right now, while it is a hashtag, it's being retweeted everywhere, from Los Angeles to London. I think we have to take advantage of this moment.
About a year ago, it's ironic, literally a year ago to the day, I had the opportunity to watch a film that articulated 3 of the most dangerous words to be ever pronounced. And those words are, "It's a girl." And this documentary talks about gendercide and how across the country, across the nation, across the globe, from community to community, one of the most dangerous ways to enter into this world is as a girl. And it talks about how in some spaces it is legal to abort, to murder, to abandon a child that is born girl because of the structures and the consciousness of these societies, these communities, and how we understand what gender is and how we create hierarchy in our interpretations. As many of you came to know this through social media, so did I. And I was reading an article at the beginning of the week, and the headline simply stated, "It's getting worse for kidnapped girls and citizens of Nigeria." And many people were like, yes, it is getting worse. And the reality is that every day that each one of these children are under the terrorism of other beings, it is getting worse. But I looked at the headline and I was upset because in parentheses, as we get to the 6th word, it says, "and citizens." And I wonder, and in my own U.S. context, question, if Nigeria had understood these girls as citizens already, would we be in this situation today?
When we stand together for those little girls. We stand as Colorado Springs, as El Paso County, as individuals gathered together, and there is strength in our numbers, and the message is being sent, and that message is no more. No more will we stand by as the world looks on. We will demand action, we demand a voice, and we demand recognition and equality, whether it's from fair pay to fair voice to fair time. This is the voice that we demand to have in the world, not just in El Paso County, not just in Colorado, but around the world. We stand with those girls. I think back to when I cast my vote for Barack Obama, and I realized that in the grand picture, that there was a little girl somewhere on this planet who was hoping that Americans did the right thing and that they elected someone who took notice, who had their back, should they ever call. We've been called, my friends. Let's answer. Thank you.
It is a tragedy that the young girls were kidnapped and taken away from their homes. But I think we have to be concerned about other countries and the actions in other countries as well. If you look at the government of Nigeria, okay, the South flourishes, the southern part of Nigeria flourishes. They're supported by the British government. But the northern part is very, 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 very poor. And we have to understand that historically. And that's what allows terrorism to grow when you have poor elements in the country. And we need to look at that in the United States ourselves, and we always are fighting for equality. We have to look at elements that are against us, elements that want to cast us into systems, and we have to look at that because it is a tragedy of what's happening to those young girls, and it's a tragedy of retaliation. If you know a little bit about the group, okay, Boko Haram, their leader was killed by the Nigerian police, and now this is retaliation for what's going on over there. So we have to be very, very careful historically, and we can't sit by any longer and not be concerned, because what happens to part of the world affects the whole world. Thank you.
Just hold our governments accountable for taking care of, or listening to the people, essentially, and demanding transparency. And even in our own country, we have local governments and state governments that aren't always truthful with the people. And I have studied some various countries in South Africa, and I know that there has been a tremendous amount of corruption and bribery that goes on. And it's very difficult for women, I think, to have any power. So I think it's very important that we all speak out and that we reclaim our power and that we hold our governments responsible.
I think that we need to hold all sexual offenders more responsible than what we do. We slap them on the hand and let them out of prison. And it's a worldwide problem now with the internet. And we, put people in prison for marijuana all their lives. And we slap, these sexual predators on the hand. I think we need to really change the laws.
We need to hold the world's major religions accountable. Fundamentalists believe they have all the answers and act out on those beliefs and denying the rights to the rest of us who may or may not believe with them or may have systemic gender inequality as part of their practice. I think that's an important component, and that the Muslims need to be holding the Muslims accountable, Christians need to be holding Christians accountable, Jews holding other Jews accountable, because that's where the real power system and structure lies with many of these problems.